10,000 species offered to mate with her, but she only wanted the human. The derelict warship hung in the debris field like a corpse suspended in black water. Cale Torin eased his salvage craft closer, thrusters pulsing in short bursts that sent vibrations through the deck plating beneath his boots. 3 centuries of radiation exposure had stripped the hull to bare metal in places, but the vessel's bones remained intact, a relic from a war so old that most species had forgotten which side they'd fought on. His scanner chirped. Breathable atmosphere in the starboard compartments, life support still functional after 300 years. Impossible. Cale ran his thumb along his knuckles, a habit from his early days when every salvage contract felt like gambling with his life. The atmosphere reading held steady. Whatever power source kept those systems running had outlasted empires. The money from this contract would cover his ship's maintenance for 6 months. Maybe longer if he didn't eat well. He suited up anyway, the docking collar sealed with a hiss that echoed through his helmet. Cale cycled the airlock and stepped into darkness broken only by his helmet lamps. The corridor walls bore scoring patterns from energy weapons, frozen mid-battle. His boots clanged against deck plating that shifted slightly under his weight, groaning like something alive. The ship's layout made no sense by modern standards. Corridors branched at odd angles, designed for a species with different spatial reasoning. He followed the atmosphere readings deeper into the vessel, past blast doors sealed by centuries of corrosion, until he reached a chamber that glowed with faint blue light. Cryostasis pods lined the walls in neat rows, all dark, all dead. Except one. Cale approached slowly, hand hovering near the plasma cutter on his belt. The pod's surface was smooth, unblemished, its monitoring systems cycling through readouts in a language he didn't recognize. Through the transparent panel, he saw her. She was tall, even lying down, pale skin that seemed to hold its own light. Hair in shades of cyan spread across the pod's interior cushioning, and her ears, large, alert even in stasis, covered in fur that shifted from hot pink to cyan, were unlike anything he'd encountered in his years scavenging the outer fringe. Her face possessed a beauty that made his chest tighten, features that were almost human, but refined beyond human possibility. The pod's interface chimed. A holographic display materialized, cycling through what looked like medical readouts. Her vital signs were stable, alive. 300 years in stasis, and she was alive. Cale's practical instincts warred with something deeper, something he'd buried years ago under layers of cynicism and self-preservation. He could leave her here. Complete his salvage contract. Let someone else deal with the diplomatic nightmare of finding a survivor from an extinct civilization. Her eyes opened, turquoise blue, brilliant, even through the pod's frost-covered panel. They fixed on him with an intensity that sent heat through his chest despite the cold air. She moved inside the pod, one hand pressing against the transparent surface, and the patterns along her temples and collarbones flared to life in shades of cyan and violet. The decision stopped being theoretical. Cale worked the emergency release. The pod hissed, pressure equalizing, and warm air flooded out, carrying a scent like ozone and something floral he couldn't name. She sat up slowly, movements controlled despite what must be disorienting awakening. Her ears swiveled toward him, tracking the sound of his breathing through his helmet's external speakers. He removed his helmet. If she could breathe this air, so could he. Her gaze traveled over him with an assessment that felt physical. When she spoke, her voice was low, melodic, shaped by vocal cords that weren't quite human. "You freed me." Not a question, a statement carrying layers of meaning his translator implant struggled to parse. "Didn't seem right to leave you," Cale said. His voice sounded rough compared to hers. "Can you stand?" She swung her legs over the pod's edge. 4-fingered hands gripped the rim as she found her balance. She stood, and Cale had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes. Nearly 7 feet, lithe muscle moving beneath armor that had once been ornate but now bore the same scars as her ship. The bioluminescent patterns along her skin pulsed brighter. Her ears tilted forward, focused entirely on him. "Your species," she said. "Human." "Yeah, Cale Torin, I'm a salvage pilot. Was your ship?" My transport, I am Savara Talveris. She took a step, testing her balance. Her movement held precision even through obvious disorientation. How long? Your vessel's been adrift for 3 centuries. Whatever war you were fighting, it ended a long time ago. Her ears flattened against her skull. The light beneath her skin dimmed, and something that might have been grief passed through her expression before she controlled it. When she looked at him again, her composure had returned, but he'd seen what lay beneath. My people? Kale shook his head. I don't know your species name, but if there are others, they're not in the databases I have access to. The patterns along her collarbones flickered rapidly, betraying emotion she kept from her face. She moved past him toward the chamber's exit, and Kale followed, acutely aware of the strength in her frame and the alien grace that made his own movements feel clumsy. They reached his salvage craft without speaking. Savara examined the interior with interest that overcame her grief, her ears perking forward as she studied the control systems. Primitive propulsion, she said, chemical acceleration with magnetic field manipulation for navigation. It gets me where I need to go. You live in this vessel? Kale gestured to the small living area behind the cockpit. Not much, but it's mine. No debt, no contracts except the ones I choose. She turned to face him, and her attention felt like being seen for the first time in years. The bioluminescence beneath her skin pulsed in patterns that seemed to respond to his proximity. You could have left me, salvaged the technology, and departed. Told you, didn't seem right. Her ears swiveled forward, and something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening that made his pulse quicken. You are not what I expected from your species. Low expectations? Accurate ones, or so I was taught. She moved closer, studying his face with an intensity that should have made him uncomfortable, but didn't. Your heart rate increased when you saw me. Heat climbed his neck. You can sense that? My people, she paused, pain flickering across her features. My people possessed psionic abilities, genetic compatibility sensing, emotional resonance. Her hand lifted, hovering near his chest without touching. You resonate. Kale didn't understand what she meant, but the way she looked at him, equal parts confusion and fascination, made something tight in his chest loosen. His comm system crackled. Outpost Meridian traffic control demanding identification and cargo manifest. Savara's ears flattened again. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe, Kale said. Somewhere we can figure out what happens next. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then her ears relaxed, and she nodded. Kale set course for the station, aware of the weight of her presence in his small craft and the feeling that his life had just become vastly more complicated than any salvage contract had ever made it. Outpost Meridian materialized against the star field like a mechanical flower, its docking spokes radiating from a central hub that housed 20,000 souls from 100 different species. Kale had called it home for the better part of a decade, but approaching now with Savara in his cockpit, the station felt different, smaller, more fragile. Savara stood behind his seat, one hand braced against the bulkhead as they navigated approach vectors. Her ears tracked every sensor ping, every comm transmission. When traffic control cleared them for docking Bay 7, her bioluminescence flickered in patterns that suggested concentration rather than emotion. You understand our language, Kale said. Your translator implant is crude but functional. I am adapting to the linguistic patterns. She leaned forward slightly, her hair brushing his shoulder. This station serves as neutral territory? Supposed to. Medical hub, trade center. Captain Markham runs tight security, keeps the peace between factions that would tear each other apart anywhere else. Then it is where conflicts begin, not end. Kale guided the ship through the docking sequence, magnetic clamps engaging with solid thuds. You think there'll be trouble? Her ears flattened. I am Velkari, royal bloodline. If any of my people's old allies recognize what I am, they will seek to claim what remains of my genetic legacy. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried weight that made him look up at her. My biology will broadcast my presence. A mating summons. I cannot control it. Heat crept up Kale's neck. How long before? It has already begun. The words settled between them like a held breath. Cale powered down the ship's systems, suddenly aware of how small the cockpit was, how her scent filled the recycled air with something that made his thoughts scatter. "Come on," he said, standing. "I know someone who can help." Dr. Mira Cohen's medical bay occupied a quieter section of the station's hub, away from the commercial chaos of the main concourse. She looked up from her diagnostic screens as Cale and Savara entered, and her expression shifted from mild curiosity to sharp assessment in the space of a heartbeat. "Cale Torin, what have you brought to my station?" "Long story. She needs medical evaluation, and I need someone I trust to keep this quiet until we figure out—" "Velkari," Dr. Cohen interrupted, moving around her desk with the brisk efficiency that had made her chief medical officer. "I've only seen your people in historical records. Most biologists thought you were extinct." Savara's ears perked forward. "You know my species?" "I know your reputation. Psionic abilities, matriarchal social structure, and the most valuable genetic material in recorded history." Dr. Cohen gestured to an examination platform. "Let me scan you. And Cale, you look like you need to sit before you fall over." The medical scan took 20 minutes. Cale watched Dr. Cohen's expression grow increasingly troubled as data populated her screens. Savara remained still throughout, her attention divided between the doctor and Cale in a way that made his skin warm. "She's healthy," Dr. Cohen said finally. "Remarkably so, considering 3 centuries in stasis. But her pheromone output is," she paused, choosing words carefully, "elevated, significantly. Every species with the sensory capability will register her as reproductively available. Most will register her as genetically optimal for hybridization." "I told you," Savara said quietly, meeting Cale's gaze. "I am the last of my bloodline. My body seeks to preserve what remains." Dr. Cohen pulled up a chair, her movements deliberate. "You need to understand what this means. Within hours, maybe less, every diplomat, genetic broker, and alliance seeker on this station will know you're here. They'll offer you everything: wealth, power, genetic enhancement for your offspring. They'll see you as the key to political alliances your people's extinction made impossible." "And they will see him," Savara said, her ears tilting toward Cale, "as an obstacle." "I can leave," Cale offered, though the words tasted wrong. "Get my ship fueled and be gone before anyone connects you to me." Savara's bioluminescence flared bright enough to cast shadows. Her ears flattened against her skull, and she crossed the space between them in 3 strides. She stopped close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. "You would abandon me to those who view me as genetic commodity?" "I'm trying to keep you safe." "I do not want safe, I want choice." Her voice dropped lower, carrying undertones his translator couldn't fully parse. "You freed me. You resonate with frequencies I have never encountered in any species. Do you understand what that means?" Cale's throat tightened. "No. It means my biology recognizes compatibility beyond genetic optimization, beyond political advantage. It recognizes—" She stopped, something vulnerable crossing her features before her discipline reasserted itself. "Something I was not taught was possible." Dr. Cohen cleared her throat. "Fascinating as this is, we have immediate problems. Station sensors will have logged Cale's arrival with an unregistered passenger. Customs will come asking questions within the hour." "Then we answer them honestly," Cale said. "She's a survivor. She gets asylum, medical care, and time to adjust before anyone pressures her into decisions." "Cale, she's royalty from an extinct civilization. There's no protocol for this." "Make one." Savara's ears perked forward again, and her hand found his shoulder. The touch sent warmth through his chest that had nothing to do with temperature. Her fingers tightened slightly, and the bioluminescent patterns along her arm pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "You would stand between me and those who come?" she asked. "That's what you want." Her gaze held his for a long moment. Then she leaned down, her breath warm against his ear, as she spoke in a voice meant only for him. "I am beginning to understand why you resonate." Station security arrived within 30 minutes. Captain Voss Markham himself, a scarred veteran whose cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Savara. Behind him, 2 officers maintained professional distance but kept hands near their sidearms. Dr. Cohen reports you've brought us a diplomatic incident, Torin. I brought you a person who needs help. Markham's human eye softened fractionally. I believe you. Unfortunately, 3 ambassadorial vessels just changed course for Meridian. They'll be here within 6 hours. Word travels fast. Savara stepped forward, her full height making even Markham adjust his posture. I will speak with those who come, but I choose who I speak with and when. I am not cargo to be inspected. Understood, ma'am. We'll establish diplomatic quarters for you in the secure wing, medical monitoring, communications access, whatever you need. I need him. Savara's ears tilted toward Cale. He stays with me. Markham's expression suggested this confirmed every headache he'd anticipated. Miss Talveris, that's going to complicate matters. If you're formally under station protection, having an unaffiliated civilian in your quarters raises questions about influence and... I am aware of the implications, Captain. They do not change my requirement. The silence stretched. Dr. Cohen caught Cale's eye and gave a small nod that might have been approval or warning. Markham's jaw worked as he processed diplomatic calculations. Cale couldn't begin to follow. 12 hours, the captain said finally. You get 12 hours of privacy to adjust and decide how you want to handle the arriving delegations. After that, I can't hold back the tide. Understood? Savara's hand found Cale's, her 4 fingers interlacing with his 5. The gesture felt monumental, witnessed by station security and medical staff alike. Understood. They retreated to the diplomatic quarters as the first ships appeared on long-range sensors. Savara stood at the viewport, watching distant engine flares, and Cale stood behind her, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. 12 hours, she said softly, and then everything becomes impossible. Then we make it possible. She turned, her ears swiveling to focus on him completely. The bioluminescence beneath her skin created patterns he was beginning to recognize as desire and hope and fear, all tangled together. Why would you risk this for me? You know nothing of my people, my lineage, the burden I carry. I know you deserve more than being treated like a genetic resource. Cale met her gaze, ignoring the voice in his head that said he was in over his depth. I know you're terrified of being alone again, and I know... He stopped, words failing. Savara closed the distance between them. Her hand cupped his face, touch gentle despite her strength. Her thumb traced his cheekbone, and her ears tilted forward in what he was learning meant curiosity and attraction. You know what, she prompted. I know I haven't wanted something this much in a very long time. Her bioluminescence flared brilliant cyan. Then she leaned down and kissed him, and the world reduced to heat and the taste of her mouth and the feeling that he'd just crossed a line that would redefine everything that came after. The 12 hours evaporated like oxygen through a hull breach. Cale woke to find Savara standing at the viewport, her bioluminescence dim, her ears pressed flat against her skull. Beyond the transparent aluminum, the station's docking ring had transformed into a diplomatic parking lot. Vessels from a dozen civilizations crowded the approach lanes, their running lights creating artificial constellations. They're here, she said without turning. Cale crossed to her, close enough to touch, but holding back. The kiss they'd shared hours ago still burned in his memory, but something in her posture warned him away. We knew they would come. Knowing and witnessing are different things. Her reflection in the viewport looked fragile. Each ship represents suitors, alliances, genetic contracts measured in centuries of political advantage. Her ears twitched. I am not a person to them. I am opportunity. You're a person to me. She turned then, and her expression made his chest tighten. Vulnerability warred with duty in her turquoise eyes. Are you certain of that? Before he could answer, the door chimed. Captain Markham's voice carried through the intercom with grim formality. Miss Talveris, the diplomatic delegations are requesting audience. We've established a reception hall in the neutral zone. I need your decision. Savara's shoulders straightened. The royal composure that had slipped during the night reasserted itself like armor locking into place. Meet with them. The reception hall held the careful neutrality of a demilitarized zone. Delegates arranged themselves by species hierarchy. the insectoid yethrins holding the position of prominence, their crystalline carapaces refracting light in calculated displays. Ambassador Thirol Cancris stood at their center, 8 feet of translucent amber chitin and compound eyes that processed Savara with mechanical precision. Kale stayed 3 steps behind her, close enough to offer support, but far enough to avoid diplomatic incident. Dr. Cohen flanked her other side, medical scanner ready to intervene if the biological stress became dangerous. Lady Talveris, Ambassador Thirol's mandibles clicked rhythmically. Your survival is fortune beyond calculation. On behalf of the Yethrin Consortium and 17 allied species, we offer sanctuary, resources, and genetic partnerships optimized for the restoration of your bloodline. Savara's ears remained neutral. You offer contracts, Ambassador, not partnership. We offer survival. Your species faced extinction due to genetic inflexibility and cultural isolation. We provide diverse genetic material, proven compatibility matrices, and political protection across 9 sectors. The ambassador's compound eyes shifted, dismissing Kale with a glance. Protection from poor decisions made in emotional confusion. Heat climbed Kale's neck, but he kept his expression neutral. This was Savara's moment, not his. Other delegates stepped forward, each presenting variations on the same theme: genetic optimization, political alliance, resources to rebuild what was lost. They spoke of her duty, her lineage, the responsibility she carried to resurrect her civilization from extinction. Through it all, Savara listened with regal patience, her bioluminescence controlled, her ears giving nothing away. When the presentations concluded, she spoke with measured clarity. You offer me everything except choice. Choice is luxury, Ambassador Thirol countered. Survival is necessity. Then I choose necessity over your version of survival. I will consider your proposals, but I make my own decisions about my genetic future. The meeting dissolved into diplomatic maneuvering. Kale followed Savara back to their quarters, aware of the stairs tracking their movement, the calculations happening behind alien eyes. Inside, she paced, the controlled composure cracked, revealing something raw beneath. They are not wrong, she said finally. My people died because we refused to adapt. We believed genetic purity made us strong, but it made us brittle. When crisis came, we shattered. That doesn't mean you owe them your body. It means I owe my people something more than selfish desire. Her ears flattened. What if choosing you, choosing what I feel, is the same mistake my ancestors made? What if I am letting emotion override logic and dooming whatever future I could create? The words hit like vacuum exposure. Kale forced himself to breathe through the sudden tightness in his chest. Is that what you think this is, a mistake? Before she could answer, the door chimed again. Ambassador Thirol entered with Captain Markham, the captain's expression suggesting he'd argued against this visit and lost. Forgive the intrusion, the ambassador said, mandibles clicking. But transparency serves all parties. Mr. Torin, your salvage contract for the derelict warship, do you recall who commissioned it? Kale's stomach dropped. Anonymous contractor, standard arrangement. Not standard, commissioned by my consortium. Thirol produced a holographic display showing transaction records, communication logs, dated weeks before Kale's arrival at the debris field. We knew Lady Talveris was aboard. We calculated that a low-status human discovering her would make diplomatic pressure more effective. You were selected, Mr. Torin. Your meeting was engineered. The floor seemed to tilt. Kale looked at Savara and saw her ears pressed flat against her skull, bioluminescence flickering in patterns that spoke of shock and betrayal. That's not, he started, but the words tangled. Because it was true. The contract had appeared in his queue with perfect timing, perfect payment, perfect access to a debris field that should have been restricted. We did not anticipate emotional complication, Ambassador Thirol continued, but this clarifies matters. Your connection was built on manipulation, not genuine compatibility. Lady Talveris, surely this changes your assessment of the human's motivations. Savara stood frozen, her gaze locked on Kale. He watched her process the revelation, saw doubt cloud what had been certainty hours before. Get out, Kale said, voice rough, both of you. Mr. Torin, Markham began. Now. They left. The silence that followed felt like suffocation. Savara moved to the viewport, her back to him, every line of her body rigid with hurt. "Did you know?" Her voice barely carried across the room. "No, I swear I didn't know." "But you suspect now. Looking back, you see the manipulation." He did. The contract had been too convenient, the coordinates too specific, the timing too perfect. He'd been a tool, chosen for his insignificance and his need for money. "It doesn't change what I feel," he said. "Whatever they planned, whatever they expected, what happened between us is real." She turned, and her eyes held an ache that made him want to close the distance and pull her close, but her ears remained flat, her bioluminescence dim. "How can I know that? How can you know that? If our meeting was orchestrated, if every circumstance was manipulated to create dependency," her voice broke. "I felt certainty, I felt resonance, but what if that was engineered too? What if I am simply responding to genetic markers they knew would trigger my biology?" "Savara, I need time, She pressed a hand to her temple, and he saw her struggling with something internal. "My ancestors, their memories, their consciousness, preserved in my genetic structure. They fill my mind with condemnation. They say I am betraying duty with human sentiment. They say—" She stopped, her whole body trembling. The bioluminescence beneath her skin pulsed erratically. "I cannot see you right now, please." The please carried more weight than a command. Cale nodded, throat too tight for words, and left. Dr. Cohen found him in the station's observation deck 3 hours later, staring at the diplomatic vessels crowding the approach lanes. "She won't speak to anyone," the doctor said. "She's locked herself in meditation. Her life signs are stable, but her psionic activity is through the ceiling." "Did I lose her because I saved her?" The question came out bitter. "Is that the cosmic joke here?" "You lost her because someone weaponized your kindness." Dr. Cohen's hand landed on his shoulder. "But Cale, if you and Savara formalize your bond, if she chooses you despite this, you'll both be placing yourselves in permanent danger. Factions that view human genetic integration as an affront to galactic order won't stop at diplomatic pressure." "She deserves choice, not obligation, not manipulation. And you deserve to know what you're fighting for." Dr. Cohen pulled up a data file on her portable display. "I've been running genetic analysis on the compatibility Ambassador Thirol mentioned. The Valkyrie psionic abilities don't respond to genetic optimization the way the consortium claims. They respond to emotional authenticity, to psychological compatibility that can't be manufactured or predicted. Your connection wasn't engineered, it was recognized." Cale stared at the data without processing it. "Tell her that. She won't listen to me." "I can't. She's blocked all communication except with one person, Ambassador Thirol. He's convinced her to undergo formal genetic matching trials. If no suitor proves more compatible than you, the consortium accepts her choice. If superior match exists, she honors duty to her bloodline." "That's a trap." "Probably, but she agreed. The trials begin tomorrow." Cale watched another ship dock, its hull bearing insignia from a civilization he'd never encountered. More suitors, more genetic contracts, more people viewing Savara as commodity rather than person. "Then I have tonight to find out who set this up and why," he said, "because this isn't about matchmaking, this is about control." Dr. Cohen's expression suggested she'd reached the same conclusion. "Be careful, Cale. You're already marked as an obstacle. Don't become a casualty." But careful had never kept him alive in the outer fringe. Reckless had. And if reckless was what saved Savara from a trap disguised as choice, then reckless was what he'd be. The matching trials began at Station Dawn, when the artificial lighting cycled to simulate planetary sunrise. Cale watched from the observation gallery as Savara entered the ceremonial chamber wearing formal Valkyrie armor polished to mirror brightness. Her ears stood at neutral attention, her bioluminescence subdued. She looked every inch the royal she was born to be, and the distance between them felt measured in light years rather than meters. Ambassador Thirol presided over the proceedings with mandibles clicking satisfaction. Suitors from 17 species presented themselves, each offering genetic profiles, political alliances, and resources measured in planetary economies. The Yethrons brought crystalline data cores containing centuries of optimized breeding programs. The Solarans offered fusion technology and territorial protection. Each presentation built a case for survival through strategic genetic partnership. Then Therion entered. Kale's hands clenched on the gallery railing. The male was Velkari, unmistakably so. 7 feet of lean muscle, skin in pale tones that caught light like Savara's, ears covered in fur that shifted through shades of violet and silver. His movements carried the same refined grace, and when his bioluminescence activated in response to Savara's presence, the patterns synchronized in ways that made the assembled delegates murmur approval. A pure match, Ambassador Thirol announced. Discovered in a surviving colony 3 sectors distant, his genetic profile offers optimal compatibility for Velkari restoration. Savara's ears perked forward slightly, biological response she couldn't control. But Kale saw what the delegates missed. Her bioluminescence remained dim, cycling through patterns that spoke of recognition without resonance. She acknowledged Therion with courtesy that held no warmth. Kale pulled out his portable comm, reviewing the data he'd spent the night gathering. Captain Markham had helped, pulling station records and cross-referencing arrival manifests with known genetic research facilities. The pieces formed a picture that made his stomach turn. Dr. Cohen appeared at his shoulder. You found something. Therion's genetic markers, they're too perfect. Artificial enhancement masked to look natural. He showed her the analysis. Someone designed him to pass compatibility tests while serving the consortium's purposes. Can you prove it? The medical data's circumstantial, but I found the facility where he was created, and I found who paid for it. He pulled up financial records showing shell corporations and transaction chains that all led back to one source. They're not trying to match Savara. They're trying to control her offspring. Turn Velkari psionic abilities into weapons. Dr. Cohen's expression hardened. We need to stop this ceremony. No, we let it play out. Kale's jaw tightened. She needs to make her choice without interference, but she deserves to know the truth first. Below, Savara underwent the formal compatibility assessment. Psionic resonance measured through neural mapping. Genetic analysis displayed on holographic screens for assembled witnesses. The data showed what the consortium wanted: numerical proof that Therion offered superior genetic restoration compared to a human salvage pilot with no enhancements and no political value. But numbers couldn't measure what Kale had learned about Velkari biology during his research. Their psionic abilities responded to emotional authenticity, not genetic optimization. They had died out not because they lacked compatible genetics, but because they'd prioritized perfection over adaptability. They'd become so refined that they'd lost the capacity to evolve. Savara stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by delegates and data that reduced her to breeding potential. Her ears swiveled slowly, taking in each face, each calculation. When Ambassador Thirol asked for her decision, she remained silent for a long moment. Then her gaze found Kale in the observation gallery. Their eyes locked across the distance, and her bioluminescence flared bright enough to cast shadows. Not the controlled pulses of biological response, raw emotion that she couldn't contain and didn't try to hide. I choose, she said, voice carrying through the chamber with royal authority, to expose this manipulation before making any decision about my future. She raised one hand, and her psionic abilities activated with visible intensity. The assembled delegates staggered as information flooded directly into their minds, proof of the genetic engineering, evidence of the conspiracy, the full scope of the consortium's plan to weaponize her offspring. Therion collapsed. Whatever artificial enhancements allowed him to pass compatibility tests failed under the psionic assault, his true nature revealed as constructed genetic material rather than natural Velkari heritage. Ambassador Thirol's mandibles clicked frantically. This is diplomatic violation. This is truth, Savara interrupted, her ears standing tall and defiant. You view reproductive choice as political commodity. You engineered this entire scenario to gain control over Velkari genetic legacy. But my people's extinction taught a lesson you refused to learn. Systems that treat individuals as resources deserve to collapse. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted accusations. Security moved to contain the situation. Captain Markham's voice cut through the chaos, declaring the diplomatic venue compromised and placing all involved parties under station arrest. In the confusion, Kale made his way to the chamber floor. Guards moved to intercept him, but Savara's psionic presence cleared a path. She met him halfway, her ears swiveling toward him with recognition that transcended the surrounding chaos. "You knew," she said. "You discovered the truth. You chose to expose it before I could. I chose to stop letting others define my worth." Her hand found his, 4 fingers interlacing with 5. The touch sent warmth through his chest that felt like homecoming. "I spent 3 days in meditation, listening to my ancestors condemn me for emotional weakness, but I realized their voices spoke from extinction, from rigid adherence to perfection that made them fragile. You." Her bioluminescence pulsed in patterns he was learning meant desire and hope and certainty. "You represent what they lost, the capacity to choose imperfection, to adapt, to value connection over optimization." Ambassador Thirol lunged toward them, mandibles spread in threat. Kale moved without thinking, pulling Savara behind him and raising his hands in defense. But she stepped alongside him, instead of behind, her psionic abilities creating a barrier that stopped the ambassador cold. They stood together, human and Velkari, facing the chaos their bond had created. Captain Markham and his security team subdued Ambassador Thirol. Dr. Cohen provided testimony about the genetic manipulation and falsified compatibility data. The assembled delegates dispersed, some in disgust at the conspiracy, others in frustration that their diplomatic opportunities had evaporated. Hours later, Kale and Savara sat in his salvage ship's cockpit. The station still buzzed with diplomatic fallout, arrest warrants issued and vessels departing, but inside the small craft, quiet settled like dust after a storm. "Our psionic bond is permanent now," Savara said softly. "When I reached for you during the confrontation, when you moved to shield me, the connection completed. I cannot reproduce with anyone else. My genetic future is committed to our hybrid possibility." Kale studied her profile, the way starlight caught in her cyan hair. "Are you certain that's what you want?" Her ears tilted toward him, and she turned to meet his gaze with an intensity that made his breath catch. "I have never been more certain of anything. My people died because they could not adapt. You taught me that survival requires more than genetic perfection. It requires courage to choose vulnerability over certainty." She reached up, hesitant, and touched his face with gentle reverence. "You freed me from more than cryostasis. You freed me from the belief that worth is measured in bloodline purity. I'm still just a salvage pilot, no genetic enhancements, no political connections, no..." She silenced him with a kiss that tasted like ozone and possibility. When she pulled back, her bioluminescence created patterns of light across the cockpit that felt like laughter made visible. "You are the man who saw a person where others saw opportunity, who risked everything for choice rather than obligation, who made me believe that the future belongs not to perfection, but to those brave enough to build something new from the ruins of what was lost." Kale's hand found her ear, stroking the soft fur that shifted from pink to cyan. The gesture made her shiver, her eyes closing briefly in pleasure. "We'll still have enemies, factions opposed to human genetic integration into Velkari bloodlines, the biological uncertainties of our hybridization, political targets on both our backs. Then we face them together." She leaned into his touch, her voice carrying certainty that warmed him from the inside. "Your adaptability and my psionic strength, your improvisation and my tactical knowledge, partnership, not dependence." Through the cockpit viewport, stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, civilizations rose and fell based on genetic determinism and political calculation. But inside the small salvage craft, 2 beings who should never have connected proved that the most important compatibility couldn't be measured in DNA sequences or predicted by psionic algorithms. 6 months later, they operated together as bonded partners, conducting salvage operations and occasionally assisting Dr. Cohen with cross-species compatibility research. Their relationship remained controversial in some sectors, but they'd begun building a small community of others who believed connection transcended genetic determinism. Kale watched Savara work the navigation console, her ears perking forward with excitement as they approached a new debris field. Her bioluminescence pulsed in patterns he now recognized as curiosity and anticipation. When she caught him staring, she smiled, a gesture she'd learned from him, adding it to her vocabulary of expression. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I spent years surviving, just existing from one contract to the next, until you made me believe I deserved more than just not dying." She crossed to him, taking his face in both hands. "And you taught me that legacy is not written in genetic code, but in the courage to choose love over protocol, change over tradition, possibility over predetermined fate." Their kiss tasted like the future, uncertain, challenging, and worth every risk they'd taken to build it together.